So with these 31 days of Halloween events, I try to have some sort of theme. I will wholly admit to having failed the prior attempts by and large. However, this time I aim to capture something I have always grown up alongside. A subgenre of a genre I love. One that combines all the fears of monstrous creatures with the desperate hope of loading your last magazine which holds but half its bullets. A sigh of relief from rooms with infinite chests and the ability to save your progress, however limited. And of course a healthy dose of puzzles that run the gambit from simple child's play to full-blown insanity. I'm of course talking about the oh-so-cozy world of survival horror. Now this year I'll largely be focusing on 3 generation-spanning titles, but I'll be sure to jump off at points to cover other titles of interest as well as is about the evolution of survival horror. There are some landmarks I'd like to check out on the way, such as where we must begin with the first horror video game, if you can call it that. Haunted House for the Magnavox Odyssey in 1972. The Odyssey isn't really a video game console, at least not in terms of what most people imagine. Hell, I spent an unbelievable amount of time trying to figure out how to emulate the game. I found random YouTube clips of people playing it with them sat before a screen, controllers in hand, and it took until I saw the AVGN video that I realized my mistake. The game I thought I was seeing was in fact just a piece of adhesive with a design on it. The Odyssey is essentially a plug-and-play. So from the large console, you have a pair of garden hoses that attach to toasters. On these toasters, you have dials. Twist one to move on the x-axis, and the other the y-axis. Think like an Etch-a-Sketch. Kids still play with those, right? But what about the game? Well, it's very minimalist, in that this is all you get. A blue screen and at most 2 flashing rectangles. The real game comes from taking one of 10 overlay designs and laying it on the TV, while also popping in a corresponding number card, which also turns on the system. Now Odyssey had options ranging from roulette to Simon Says and even hockey, but the most gameplay you'll get is glorified Pong. In fact, everything is reliant on the imagination and a lot of self-imposed rules by the 2 players. But this brings us to the first ever horror video game, Haunted House. The overlay depicts a haunted house with all the fixings one can expect. Roaring fireplace, black cats, bloody handprints, and a chained up skeleton for good measure. Oh my goodness, I just got a place on top of a hill and I'm living it up.
If any of you decide not to stay, you must leave with the caretakers now. You won't have a chance to change your minds later.
If you can give Haunted House one thing, it definitely has a cool look, even if it's just an overlay you slapped on your TV. But how do you play this? Well, one player is a detective, while another plays a ghost. The detective either closes their eyes, or more appropriately for the age demographic, leaves the room, while the ghost selects somewhere to hide. You then hit reset on the console, which hides the ghost player marker, and the detective can go in. You have access to 2 stacks of cards, one of clues, the other of secret messages. The detective gains clue cards by searching the house in a predefined order. It's literally marked out in the rather sizable 35-page guide. Don't worry, this guide is for the whole system. Should the detective appear in a window, he will lose a clue card. So, since the overlay kind of hides your rectangle and the detective is the larger one, I think it's supposed to emulate the sensation of bumbling around in the dark. I think at this point, I'd rather just go downstairs and hope the monsters down there don't eat me. So yeah, you stumble around, and each item you reach, you get a clue card. These don't do anything except for serve as points come the end of the game. The desk on the 3rd floor gives the detective a secret message. This is some sort of task like go back to a blue item. Upon completion of the path, you count up the clue cards, and that's the score. The players then switch roles and repeat the process. But why was the ghost hiding? Well, that's where the game gets a bit cheeky, as it outright encourages the ghost to hit reset and shout boo at their rival player. This would occur when the detective happens across the path of the ghost, upon which half of the clues shall be taken from his score.
And then they'll come for you.
I won't lie and say that yelling boo at a sibling or a friend is something I shied away from doing every once in a full moon. However, it is telling that the most played feature of this game was the table tennis, as it required essentially none of the additional bits and bobs that the system came with. On a certain level, I find it charming. It's such an early concept of the horror genre, and while it's far from what I would really even consider a video game, it does manage to capture many aspects of future horror titles. A detective or some sort of law enforcement, a creepy house, even bumping around wall humping everything for some items to interact with. It arguably even has jump scares. While it's not where I started my journey into the world of survival horror, it is pleasant to see where it began as a seedling. That same year would see the release of another haunted house, this one a very early light gun from Midway Manufacturing. Yes, that one. You'd have several targets that would be moved about mechanically, you shoot one, it would go back to its starting position. Essentially a smaller version of the Cabela shooting gallery, if you ever got taken to one of those stores as a kid. Last time I went to the one at the mall closest to me, it ate my quarters, and after I complained a bit, the manager gave me my 2 quarters back. Half the guns were destroyed too. The place was so decayed it started looking like a haunted house. Do animals become ghosts? Does that mean there's beaver ghosts? Do they still chew wood? Before I get lost down that rabbit hole, or I suppose stopped at that beaver dam, let me add that the big selling point of Haunted House was that it came with sound, musics, and cries from the various enemies. Here's a brief bit from a video that goes way more in depth with the title. In fact, due to my inability to record these games, I have been relying on various channels. Do be sure to check them out. I'm not trying to steal footage, I'm just using what little quality recording I can obtain of these games. Finally, I suppose my last detail to add is that the game functions on shots and not time, so you can effectively sit there for a fair bit just listening to the 8-track. Also, the actual setup and design of everything is rather charming, rather harmless and more spoopy than spooky, but not everything needs to be Pumpkinhead smiling at you levels of scary. Now, following the release of the Odyssey and so many lawsuits, gaming would continue. Included in this was horror, at least sort of. You had Hunt the Wampus in 1973 and Shark Jaws in 1975. Mystery House of 1980 would give you a quaint murder mystery. Then in 1981, we would once again be graced with a video game using the title of Haunted House, this time on the Atari 2600, and with a story prompt for our bit of trespassing. So the story goes that in the town of Spit Bay, there lived an old man named Zachary Graves. Past tense, he did die, and now his house is condemned. Also, the townsfolk suspect he knew where the urn of the first family of Spirit Bay was. Supposedly, it broke into 3 pieces during an earthquake in the 1800s. So hey gamer, Atari paid to open up the house. Go in there and find it. Also, the old man might have been part wizard, as he used to walk around with a scepter, claiming it warded off the evil. Well, much like in the 1972 title, you are now literally bumbling around in the dark. In fact, all you have that represent where you are is a pair of eyeballs. And while on lower difficulties you can see the walls, that doesn't mean you can see 5 feet in front of you. So in order to find anything of worth, you'll need to light a match. With one lit, you can find items on the floor and pick them up. Do be careful, you can only carry 1 item at a time. The 3 urn pieces will fit together, but if you want the protection of the scepter, you'll need to drop the urn. The game takes place between 4 floors with 6 rooms each. It's not a super complex layout, but it's fun to explore, especially with the enemies running around. First up is the simple tarantula, which looks like a giant hairy spider. Wait, aren't tarantulas spiders? Well, more threatening is bats, and ultimately, a ghost that haunts the halls. It should be added that the game has 9 difficulty stages, which get progressively more difficult. Not just the number of hostiles, but also in additional hindrances. The house may be pitch black with only the occasional bit of, I think, lightning during chase to show you where the walls are. Bats will not only take one of your 9 lives, but also whatever item you're carrying and place it randomly around. Locked doors requiring keys will pop up, and come the end, enemies will be capable of chasing you across the map. Your only protection is the scepter you find, but you'll have to drop it if you want to win. Speaking of that, once you do find all 3 pieces, you must run out of the house careful not to get caught. Now with 9 lives it is rather generous, but later levels can get a bit difficult. I especially like how if a creature is in the same room as you, your match gets blown out and you can't light a new one. While some have called this the first survival horror game, I disagree. While there's the beginning outline of the general frame of the genre, the game doesn't really push what would become synonymous with the genre entirely. It's more a proto-survival horror title than a full-fledged one. Still, it's rather fun and engaging despite being minimal compared to modern games. It actually has a ton of thought, from the explanations for seeing the walls on easier difficulties is because candles are on the walls, to the fact your eyes move around depending on where you're running. It's downright charming and something I think is worth checking out. Also, you really don't want to get caught, because the game will let you know. As time moved forward, evolution of gaming would keep happening. While 2D continued to be perfected, 3D would start seeing attempts, one of which is the 1982 ZX81 title, 3D Monster Maze. The setup is simple. You are attending a carnival and are greeted by this clown. He comes with an offering of seeing an amazing T-Rex that was preserved in silicon. Taking up his offer, it becomes clear that it's no longer trapped. The whole game plays out on 18 by 16 randomized maze you must navigate. The whole time there's a T-Rex prowling. With no sound at all, your sole information regarding the beast is delivered with various text. It can inform you on if it's resting, moving around, seeing you, or getting close. Luckily, you are rather fast and can outrun the T-Rex, but it's possible to still get caught or trapped in a dead end. Also, the design, well, more like those older 1950 films, is pretty good. I rather like how you can watch it come into view before ultimately being eaten. The game is rather fair and you can easily find your way out by just running around. Mapping could work, but you'd most likely get eaten while trying to jot it down. In fact, the only thing I can call unfair is the ending. A man with terrible hair must run the circus because your fate is decided on a coin toss. Win, and you go free. But if you lose, you must try it all over again. You are given the choice to accept this appeal coin flip, but it is humorous to imagine you just barely escape a T-Rex, think you're out, and then you're asked if you want out, and oh shit, we landed on tails. Back in you go. I find calling this the birth of survival horror very strange. Nothing in it is survival horror. In fact, having a single, unkillable enemy that pursues the player through a complex layout is more akin to Outlast than Resident Evil. Well, let's rewind the clock back 2 years to 1980. There existed a simple little game involving enemies the player must avoid, but they can fight back with a limited amount of ammunition that they can utilize. That title is Pac-Man. Now I realize Pac-Man isn't really scary, though the ghosts do make angry little faces when they close in, at least I think. I really can't tell if I'm playing the OG or some slight variation. The concept is unchanged fundamentally. You are Pac-Man and you have to run around collecting little orbs while one by one ghosts are deployed to hunt the player down. Clear the board and you win. Get caught and lose one of your 3 lives. Occasionally bonus points will spawn in the middle of the map. I imagine most of my audience is familiar with Pac-Man. Hell, most of you probably know fully well that the ghosts even have something of personality to them. The red one, Binky, will be the most aggressive. He'll try to chase the player down, whilst Pinky prefers to cut the player off and ambush them. Inky, the cyan, is more complex with his pattern being based off Blinky and the player's positioning. Meanwhile, Clyde, the orange one, is probably the earliest form of the cannibals from the forest. He's a complete wild card, sometimes running, sometimes chasing, sometimes wondering why the fuck he's called Clyde. But you do have limited means of fighting back. Power pellets occupy each of the 4 corners, and with it you can briefly fight back, though I mostly found it useful to grab one and just earn progress, only taking a kill if the opportunity was there. Ghosts will of course respawn once they've raced back to the spawn point. You know, with enemies filling more and more of the map, it's a lot like how the Spencer Mansion will spawn more zombies and threats when you return to it. The longer the game goes, the more dangerous it becomes. Now, Pac-Man would go on to be copied many times, often with little to no change, but as if seeing the sign of horror, Atari in 1982 would bring us Alien on the Atari 2600. Based off the movie with Sigourney Weaver and Tom Skerritt, this game has the player running around the Nostromo stomping alien eggs. Meanwhile, the Xenomorph will begin prowling the vessel for them. Or I suppose I should say Xenomorphs. This game is more aliens, but with the weapon limitation of Alien 3. At least I think those are Xenomorphs. They look more like the chick from the Thing prequel. Either way, the game plays near exactly like Pac-Man. Clear the board, use phasers to kill the Xenos, and repeat. However, in a smart decision, the game chose to incorporate a flamethrower, each full counter giving you about 4 seconds of fuel. It can't kill the Xeno, but it can possibly repel them. While I never saw it myself, I did hear there's a chance of it doing nothing and them still killing you. Weirdly, I found it had an AoE type effect. I didn't actually have to hit the Xeno. Utilizing the difficulty switches on the Atari can change up if phasers work or if the Xenos follow a fixed or random pattern. There's also a bonus mode that has you trying to cross the screen in 8 seconds to earn another fuel tank. I think the most notable thing for me was that there's only ever one phaser on screen at all times. It does make it seem like you have to prioritize going off in that direction, if only for the safety. The game is truly just Pac-Man with some added bells and whistles. That isn't a terrible thing, but back in the day it was a criticism due to just how many Pac-Man clones there were. That all said, I truly believe you can identify this title or Pac-Man as a starting up survival horror. It has resource management. In the case of Alien, it gives you multiple to keep track of, and weigh the pros and cons of using. Sure, you can use up your fuel, or you can just run and evade the creatures while you squash the last of the eggs. Or maybe you'll get a phaser and turn the tide for a brief amount of time. It's still lacking a ton of what would come to be associated with the genre, but the signs are there. Also, the game wasn't too bad. Though I always thought you were in the vents and not the ship hallways. Even knowing that, I felt more like Dallas going the wrong way in the vents. Well, I have plenty more haunted houses to explore, monsters to run from, and weapons to find. This year we'll actually have a nice horror-filled event, full of spooks and spoops. Welcome to 31 Days of Halloween. Allow me to be a generous host, and hold on to your ink ribbons.
Who closed the door?